Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast with me, Ben Talon, illustrator and creativity coach, founder of the Creative Condition, artist and writer. I bring 20 years of creative industry experience and a lifelong love of creativity, a fundamental pillar of human happiness, to you through ongoing personal exploration and the shared experiences of others. You'll get a nourishing mix of creative industry professionals and people far and wide using creativity in ways that can take our learning to the next level so we can maximise our unique blend. The show's been supported from day one by Illustration X, a tremendous illustration agency representing a shining global roster of illustrators and animators over at illustrationx.com. The music for the show is by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on all good streaming services. And for everything else, for my coaching, resources and inspiration, head to thecreativecondition.com.
We have tons of stuff here. It's cool stuff. We don't know what it is. Maybe we don't need to know what it is. And it occurred to me, we were just making some sandboxes, some playgrounds, and then we would put it up and film it and just find these happy accidents and moments. And that was eye-opening for me. I was like, we don't need to answer this. We just need to make some general areas to play in. And then we're going to film this for a day and have 5 hours of moments for a 2.5-3 minute video. Like, this is what it should be.
I'm joined by PJ Richardson, co-founder of Laundry, an LA-based design and animation studio. PJ's own artwork is mesmeric, syrupy, sickly, and it drags you into a beautiful world of imagination, but there's a wonderful human story underneath it, and that's what we're getting into today. This is The Creative Condition. How are you doing, guys? Welcome to the show. My name is Ben Talon, founder of The Creative Condition, host of this podcast for 10 years, author of Champagne and Wax Crayons, Riding the Madness of the Creative Industry, and the Creative Condition book, which you can find all of that on the website, thecreativecondition.com. I'd love to see you there. We've got a reading list, we've got coaching opportunities, we've got over 300 episodes in the archive of this very show. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen today. Welcome back if you're a regular. Hello if you're new. Thank you for choosing this show. I'd love your feedback. I hope you enjoy what you hear. If you like it, get in touch, ben@bentalon.com. You can also hit me up on LinkedIn. It's been a funny couple of weeks. My mood has evened out a little bit. I had a bumpy couple of weeks there with a little anxiety and a little financial panic, the overwhelm of doing too many things creatively and trying to find the time to give each one the attention it deserves. Feeling like at times I was lacking depth. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. It's something I work with my coaching clients. I help them to find that focus, find what is best aligned with where they are in their lives right now. Because we do, don't we? We forget to course correct. We forget to put boundaries in place that leave us the headspace and the time to immerse ourselves in our creative work. It's so easy to live life as a to-do list and to beat ourselves with guilt when we don't have enough checked boxes by the end of a day to say that we have been productive in the traditional sense. And I think that badge of hard work is dangerous. I think it's dated. We're seeing that now with many successful studios doing 4-day weeks, hybrid working. They're remaining fluid as to what they need in this moment and not being trapped by previous conventions. Anyway, how are you? Got PJ Richardson, on the show today, co-founder of Laundry. Laundry, a fantastic agency from their website. Specialising in 2D, 3D character work, kinetic typography and VFX, we combine creative storytelling with a colourful, tech-forward approach. Known for our vibrant, humble culture, we strive to delight audiences and brands alike. So these guys are wonderful. They're based in Los Angeles, San Francisco and New York, and PJ, as co-founder, has got quite the origin story. Good bit of turmoil and trauma in there, and many themes that will come up today that a lot of you will relate to in terms of making time to get into the right creative headspace, the pressures of commercial and client work. PJ talks about his backstory, growing up with a little trauma in his childhood, which led him to working as a graffiti artist, turning up at art college and not quite knowing whether he fit. A little bit of imposter syndrome, which is something that he still carries to this day. We're going to get into that vulnerability. It's a great story. I met PJ at Paradiso in Mexico earlier this year when we were both signing our books at the same time. I was signing the biography I'd written for Hector Ayuso, founder of the festival and previously founder of Off Festival in Barcelona. And the book was The Reason You're Doing It, something that Hector said to me in our very first conversation about how he was able to carry the pressures of starting a festival with no money and getting himself in debt. That's what he said to me, it's the reason you're doing it, and it had real resonance. PJ is a longtime friend of Hector, and Hector had put together PJ's book full of all his wonderful psychedelic at times artwork. This digital art that he makes is really striking and beautiful, and it was a book full of it. So we had a small conversation, but because we were in the heat of the moment, we didn't get a chance to talk. But PJ very kindly got in touch afterwards and said, I'm curious about all the things that you're doing. Have you got time for a conversation? So we hopped on a Zoom call and we got on really well, and we've ended up doing some coaching work together through the creative condition, which has been very exciting to work with somebody of PJ's repute. And then this podcast. So bringing you his story today. I'd love to hear your thoughts, ben@bentalon.com. If you get a chance, do tell a friend about the show if you enjoy it. It goes a long way. Rate, review, subscribe. That also really helps if you give it 5 seconds just to go and drop a little rating on whatever platform you're listening on. Big thank you to the founding sponsor of the show, as ever, Illustration X, doing a lot of great work for our creative industry, for visual communicators, for illustrators, animators that they represent on the website, right through to all of us who rely on intellectual property protection and people having those big conversations at the highest level with government and the likes, and they play a big role in that alongside the likes of the Society of Artists Agents, the Association of Illustrators. So check them out, illustrationx.com. Please do consider supporting the Ukrainian Institute. You can do that at ui.org.ua. Doing a lot of great work to support and spread the word of the talents of the Ukrainian creative community and their bravery and inspiring work at this horrific time of war. So check them out over there. That's about it from me. If you want to get in touch about any coaching opportunities, I'm trying to push the pit stop at the moment. It's a one-to-one intensive session where we work through all of your creative makeup, hopes, dreams, fears, hormones, humour, mischief. We get into environment, we get into skills, we go through all of it, and we try to identify the best path and how to get there moving forward. It does what it says on the tin. It is a pit stop for your creative life and career. I would love to work with more of you, so get in touch. I'm happy to structure payments to make it work for freelancers. It is not that expensive. I put so much into this work. I find it incredibly fulfilling and I want to do it a lot more. So check it out, thecreativecondition.com/coach. That's it. Let's get into it. My conversation with the wonderful co-founder of Laundry Studio, PJ Richardson.
I grew up in downtown San Francisco in Chinatown in the mid-90s with a single mom who was alcoholic and I kind of figured out later a bit bipolar and in a fairly abusive relationship, not with a lot of money. So it was pretty challenging. But I had this sort of strange dichotomy because she was French. I went to a private French school in San Francisco so I was going to school, a bunch of really, wealthy kids with not a lot. And that's okay. That happens to multiple, to many people in the world. But in being sort of in a tough situation as a youth, I friended up with a lot of other kids, and you find your tribe a little bit. And I found a lot of other kids in similar scenarios, and sort of, I think the struggle of it all. You're a kid, you don't know that why it doesn't feel right, but it didn't feel, none of it felt all that right. So you do things to try to make it feel right. And in my case, I got into. I was always pretty artistic, always painting since I was a little kid, and got into graffiti. And that was sort of my fuck you to the world and to my own situation and the lack of control of it. But all of those things sound sort of doom and gloom, and on the one hand they are, but then it taught me. So it was a very good life lesson for art and for business later on. It taught, the art of hustle, the art of marketing in a way. I mean, graffiti is basically marketing. Like it's at its core, so it taught me all these things. And then my dad lived pretty far away and was had the know-it-all though to be like, hey, why don't you're not, you don't have the grades to go to Stanford academically, but you certainly have the art for it, somewhat of the art thing. And so applied to a bunch of art schools and found my way out east and left when I was I think 17 or 18.
What role? Sorry to do. What role did? Because I'm fascinated by any sort of tribes. I think it's magic. It fills me with so much magic to see people in their tribes to experience my
Mhm.
own. I'm interested in how that helped you with self-awareness and to get that understanding of who you were as an individual. I mean, I want to preface that by saying that none of us know in those early years, teenage years, it's, we know the brain hasn't developed. It's very hard to have a conscious understanding of self. But did you feel belonging that might have been lacking at home in those communities and in the pursuit of this craft that you'd found?
Absolutely. You find what, and this happens now. This happens to this day with, it still happens. It still happens. There's people at Paradiso that I'm friends with for not very surprising and specifically similar reasons, from traumas, tribes, addictions, any number of things you can go down the line. But yeah, in that case, I befriended a lot of people, friends that had similarly broken homes that were usually that was kind of the base of it. And then there was this same attitude of like, well, let's go do graffiti. Let's go, run the streets and run amok and all of that. And so you end up yeah, you end up we all gravitate towards people generally like us, I think, in some way. And
Mm.
that was a an interesting um few years. The challenge though and I talk about this in the book with those a few of the people closest to me also just life went way too far and they passed away when I was 18, and so that's when that was kind of the like holy fuck moment. It was both so painful and so eye awakening to be like, well, this isn't gonna go anywhere good. And so that's where the whole like art school thing was like, all right, I gotta run away from this and get out of here and just try something else. It really did feel like I wasn't gonna end up in a great place if I had stayed there as sort of oddly comfortable as it gotten with all of that. So um, I think the we're getting to the heavy stuff really quickly, but it's good. It's really good. I think the only thing that I regret about this, and I had a sort of similar conversation with someone else the other day about this, is that when you're in that situation, in that kind of world, you do things, even creative things, even work things purely out of like desperation and survival, and that's good. That you absolutely should. But what took me a really long time to figure out with creativity is that there's a good amount of creativity that happens in when you're in a place of abundance, and to try to like break apart that part of like, I just have to do this to survive, to let me create this space to explore and experiment and self-express from a place of space, which took me a really long time to figure out. And I still struggle with it sometimes.
Mm.
But that was something that has been a bit of a journey. And I see it a lot with other people too. It's like, I gotta get it on the first try. I gotta just do what the client asks. And you're like, not really. But it's hard to when you kind of have that tattooed into your psyche when you're starting out, it's hard to break out of that. I think for everybody, no matter what their situation is.
Mm. Do you mean in the sense that, so from the struggles that you had, that you're more willing to challenge and push for a better solution?
Not less so because of it. Usually it was just to, you know, here, I'll go back to the graffiti analogy. It's a very good one. So like it there's one graffiti artist that just writes their name really quickly, the best they can one time to get it up and up and up and basically not get in trouble. There's
Mhm.
another side of it that's like, hey, let me figure out either a place or a space to take my time to make the biggest, most majestic mural you possibly can. Let me try different versions. Let me experiment. And let me do it from a place either because I'm so sure about my art and I don't give a shit, or I created space that I'm not going to get in trouble. And I think many of us get into the like, let me just write my name up one time and run away before I get in trouble or before I fear that I'm failing or whatever, whatever you want to decide it to be, versus the other side that's like, no, let me make space to make something grand. And it's so
That's
I'm
a
trying to always get, to that
that's a
side.
that's a tremendous analogy. That's really great. I mean, already
Yeah.
my brain is kind of taking it into other fields now. I'm thinking of context and football, and a kind of a snapshot that's just got lucky one time, and but then the person who, yeah, it's the craft, it's the love of the craft, isn't it, and the willingness to fight for it.
Yeah, and trusting the process. And I mean, it's we're in that mode. We're always going to be in that mode, I think in design. But I think you see it now more than ever with shrinking budgets, social media, any number of different things. Like just do it once, just make it great. And you're like, no, we need space to experiment, to craft, to polish, to try and fail, and that kind of a thing.
Absolutely,
Uh,
that psychological safety comes into it.
yeah, 100%. So yeah, those were the years.
Yeah. And so, how did you respond to art school? How did you feel when you got there?
Oh, yeah, I'm walking right into another one. Uh, I would say the art school was devastating. Because we all come from some some background, some high school, where you're like, oh, I'm generally good or one of the best at art at your high school, and then you go there and you're like, oh boy, like it's going from like being the best on your local football team to like Champions League, basically. And you're just like, everybody crushes. And so that was very, very humbling. And I moved across the country. So it was like a whole new place and a whole new culture I didn't know much of. So, but it was good. I think I ditched the graffiti thing pretty quickly because I was like, I loved it, but I was like, okay, well, this isn't really going to get me. Um, it was pretty clear that it was limiting as to what I could do with it as a medium, and it certainly wasn't going to be a long-term career for me. So I had taken a graphic design course in high school in the summer, and I was like, well, and I like computers, and then I got into I went to university in Baltimore, Maryland, which is pretty gritty city. But they had a lot of like warehouse raves and stuff like that. And so we go to those all the time. I got really into like music and visuals, and that sort of bridged motion design and graphic design for me. And then it was kind of off to the races from there for motion design, which is what I still do to this day.
Yeah, and it's funny looking at the book and the work. It's already starting to kind of. I'm starting to see patterns coming from those stories, and I love there's something beautiful about understanding the architecture of a person's creativity by hearing those stories. Um, did you? I I loved college from a belonging and a social standpoint. I look back, I was pretty terrible, but I think that's quite important. Do you think that's?
Yeah.
I think it's quite important to make bad art for a while.
I hugely agree with you. I could not agree. In fact, to be honest, my only regret about college was not taking advantage of that more. Um, you don't know what you don't know, right? But like,
Yeah.
if I knew what I knew now, I would have worked at a much more vigorous pace to make a bunch of things and experiment with a bunch of things to really just to make a lot of mistakes and find new areas to experiment and have that safety to do that. That would be the one thing. I mean, they were pretty good about it. I will say the school I went to was it felt hard at the time, but it was really good about pushing the students into many different areas and categories to try, from painting to drawing to all that. But yeah, I would agree. The thing that's kind of funny about art school, at least, the regular academic school completely understand it, but the the grading system at art school always kind of made me laugh because you're just like, this is, yeah, I guess you could grade on effort, but like it's so subjective.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's funny one.
Did you find did you did you find any kind of, so given the struggles of your youth, did you find any intellectual disparity at art school? Because I always find it such a great range of people in there from different backgrounds. I never felt particularly smart. School made, and I think this is common among creatives people in our industries, that school has a way of making you feel not as intelligent as others when your form of intelligence is not the one that ticks the boxes on the exam papers. And did you arrive at art school and find any kind of, did you feel intimidated in any way, I guess, intellectually when?
Uh, no, you know what I felt intimidated by was artistically. Like I felt like I didn't fit the art school student because I was kind of more of a, I don't know, hip hop graffiti sort of 90s prep, like, kid, not the like, not the picture perfect artist, in terms of like what I wore, how I talked, hung out,
Mhm.
all of that. So I felt like a complete outsider, um, there. But what I it took me a while to get comfortable with it. But what I realized is art doesn't have a it has a stereotype, but amazing artists don't fit a stereotype. I had this one friend of mine that was a couple actually. There was a bunch of kids from Miami, a bunch of Cuban and black kids from Miami that came from this school called New World and they were just the most. They didn't fit the art school framing at all, but were just incredible artists. And then we had this other friend of ours from Houston that was this black guy that was um, he was he was a gang member from Houston that got a scholarship to play basketball at a D1 university. He's incredibly good at basketball. And was like, no, I just want to go to art school and paint, and was the most phenomenal portrait painter I have ever seen in my life. Like, and he didn't fit the art school thing at all, and he didn't give a shit. He just was like, this is what I want to do. This is what I like to do. And that was a pinnacle moment where I'm like, art is and design is, it's anything. It's not some picture on Pinterest.
You're absolutely right, and I love that. I love that they're quite. I find they're quite rare, those characters who are just don't care to that degree.
Mm-mm.
It's when I think when you come across them, you should feed off them.
I agree. I agree. Something about the book and even back to the university and the childhood stuff too, though, is I look back on it now and I definitely set this intention of like, hey, shit can suck or feel crappy, but what we do with our work, whether it's commercially or personally, I have, and I talk about this in talks a bit, uh, every bit intention of creating happy work to create a happy place, even if it's not the one that I felt like I was in, but it's one that you can bring where you want to be, emotionally or quite literally into the work. And that was definitely a decision that fed into, um, the work itself, colorful graffiti, colorful design. And it's just sort of like, oh, let's aim for the happy place. And I think that even transcends to now. It's just sort of like, well, shit, stuff's hard and crazy, but it's every bit about making great work, but also pushing to make for a happy place of some sort. It's a little naive, I know, but it's like, what else is there if not to aim for
I
for
don't
for
think
joy?
it's
You know what I
I
mean?
don't think it's naive in the slightest. I think it's massively overlooked. And I was doing a coaching session with someone the other day, and I talked about the power of even just smiling at a person in the street, and to
Yeah.
remember that you might kickstart something in somebody's day that changes the world, and that should take a weight of burden off our shoulders to feel like we have to do everything alone, and just to remember the power of, it might be a beautiful drawing, it might be a story, it might just be something that you had to scream at the sky because you've suffered. But really, there's so much power and potential in that should give us comfort at all times. And why not push for that? Because if the artists are not pushing for that, then we are screwed.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. I know. And or this thing where you just accept for things for how they are, which sounds like kind of that's just not me. That's like I'm not gonna tell me how let the dudes tell me how the world is. I'm gonna go carve it out and find the good stuff here or make it. So
Well,
yeah.
absolutely. There's a huge aspect of change within creativity, isn't there? So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of our job. You know, they're truly the great practitioners, the great studios. Of course, they're pushing for the next new thing. That's why they get employed, and particularly with people's fears around automation, it's that will be the differential, I think, with whether AI becomes a bad thing for them or a tool.
Yeah, I know, I agree, and I think you just don't know. I think you just have to forge ahead and see what happens. I'd be curious. I'm gonna throw this back at you because I have a thought on it, but I think something you just slipped in a second ago. I think is it's hugely important. I think we all think it's just us or we're alone on this, and I'd be curious to see what you think of this. But like, one of the big things going to these conferences and on the one hand we get to do a chat and it's wonderful for your ego and all that but on the other hand I think just being there and hearing other people's stories to me it doesn't give me some magic button to fix whatever I'm going through, but to know other people are going through stuff, you're just like, oh, like I'm not alone here. Like I'm part of a tribe. Like this is hard. It's everybody, even the best, even who you don't think. And I think that's something I hope for all creatives to have.
I think that all humans should have that. And I think that it's
Yeah.
especially profound in our world because creativity is an extension of self. And
Hmm.
therefore, that vulnerability in sharing. Because you find at these conferences that people are coming to give something that's very real, whether that's a personal or professional project, it really doesn't matter. I think that they're talking about something that matters to them that they've invested time in. And when you're making, whether it's for a client or for yourself, it's an extension of you. And therefore, in those places, there is magic because people are there sharing, and it's war stories, and it's everything else, and it's just. I think it's wonderful, and I really think just to go broader with it that it's something that's lacking in our society. I think we need more community spaces and we need more public forums where people can go and just do that because not to go down that rabbit hole, but the sort of
Yeah.
online toxicity. But I just think that there's something beautiful about being under the same roof as people that you can find commonality with.
I agree because I think there's a you get this is one of the hardest things, especially with remote work, but you get when you're in a room with someone, I don't want to say you're afraid to be yourself or you hold back, but you can pick up on in an empathetic way a lot more than when you're behind a screen. I mean, you think of like
Mm.
online comments and trolls and all that. Like no one would say that to someone's face if they had to stare them in the eye and be like, they're gonna feel bad if I said this. And I think that mechanism trend, I just agree with you. I think just being all in the same room to actually will make us care about each other a lot more. And I think that's when really good things happen.
Oh, I think so. Absolutely. I think it's a human pillar. That's kind of how we evolved to take it right back.
Yeah.
And therefore it makes us feel good. If I always, if ever I go too long, which I'm quite a relatively new parent, so it happens quite often, but if I go too long without being in the same room with people I care about, the moment I do it again, it's a big breath of fresh air and it's a reminder every single time. Don't spend so long alone next time because it's not good for
Yeah.
you.
No, 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 definitely not. Definitely not. I agree. I agree.
So what were your professional origins then? So looking after art school, what were the did you come out there feeling good? Was it a lot of stumbling around and finding out?
No, so I had my so my one of my natural skill sets. I don't have many, but the one good thing I am is I have the good I'm good gift of gab and good at like hustling and networking and finding my ways into places and then it's and then I got a lot to prove once I do and but I got a job as an intern apprentice with a big designer in New York who went on to go be a partner at Pentagram and I thought that I was like this is what I need to do. He was our professor. It was like New York high graphic design, all this stuff. And so I did that and more or less got fired in about 2 months. And it was just I was devastated. I was like, but So it was a little bit bumpy in the immediately, but then I was like, wait a minute. I figured out, I don't know that I consciously figured out, but I figured out like, wait, that's not me. I'm this like wild, crazy, wacky designer. I was inspired by David Carson and Neville Brody and Tomato and a lot of UK actually designers were a humongous influence on me. I wanted to do kind of wilder, crazier stuff, and I put my portfolio on a little computer disk because that's what we had at the time. Threw it in a FedEx and sent it to this studio out in LA called Fuel, motion graphics studio doing equally wild shit, and they're like, "Yeah, come work." And so as soon as college ended, I took a few months to travel, and then went out there, and that was it. Um, and that's what got me kind of right into motion design, and again, I've never sort of left doing it since.
I think there's a really big lesson there, and it's doing the work that feels good to you and sharing it. Simple. It's a simple lesson. We have obviously way more tools to do that now, but at the same time, look at that for a great example. Send out one thing, connect with the right people, and you obviously send it to somebody who you felt some resonance with, which is equally important.
I cannot stress that enough. I talk about that a lot in with mentorships and talks and stuff like that. It was an incredibly good lesson in finding your tribe. I thought I needed to be. I thought on paper it was prestigious or any whatever however you want to call it to go work with this designer in New York that was award winning and all this stuff. And him and his team were perfectly nice. There was not an ounce. They should have fired me. Like but it wasn't fit. It wasn't who I was and what I was really doing and what I was really finding joy in. And then I did find, but it did force me to find that. And then I went back. It was, I always like to think that I wouldn't call it fail upwards, but I put myself in challenging situations. I think most creatives do because otherwise we get bored and unhappy. But when I went out to LA, it was with this team of motion graphics artists that were like doing the wild stuff that I was doing, but like on steroids. But it was good. It makes you lift yourself up to meet the moment. And I was just talking about this in a mentorship meeting yesterday. Like, what was incredible about it was that, and this is all university to real work. I think from what I can tell, it just the volume of work that you would make in such a short amount of time was so crazy and stressful and different than what we're used to at school. But you get so much better faster because you get over that. You just stop overthinking.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this bananas work ethic training that I still have to this day. So it was cool.
Did they allow you the freedom to grow, make mistakes, and be playful?
I mean, at a level that I don't think anybody would comprehend even now. Like, I think the closest I've seen that gets to it, it's not the same style, but the closest I've seen that gets to it are like the Man vs. Machines or Featured Alexas that have changed their workflow to be about experimentation and creating tons and tons of good stuff early on. This was similar to that, where it was just like, okay, just let it rip, make piles of things and good things. There was a ton of pressure to be excellent, but it felt more like, like you're in the kitchen of the bear or something, where it's like high intensity, making incredible amounts of things under pressure and experimenting, making, perfecting. But we would just make a humongous volume of stuff and then narrow down to what would become ultimately the project versus trying to just do like, here's your 3 directions or your 1 direction, which I miss. And I try to get back to now as much as possible.
Yeah, it's so difficult to maintain that. I think that there's a great story, and I don't know if you're familiar with Tony Wilson. He used to run the Hacienda and Factory record label in Manchester.
Oh, yeah.
And just a real maverick in his way. But I interviewed Sean Ryder from the Happy Mondays, and he talks about how they should have been nowhere near a recording studio, at the time. But what Tony Wilson loved equally, maybe even more, than the musical potential was this just the solidarity of this little gang of kids who come from an estate in the UK. And he wanted to see what happened when he put them in a recording studio and let them, without stifling that personality. Now I understand from business point of view, there's only so far you can go with that, and maybe it's not sustainable in the long run at a certain level. But there's just something beautiful about them being thrown in and the raw energy and the storytelling that emanated from that band because of the lack of restriction. And then it gives you something to refine, which is kind of where it comes into your point, which is, let's throw some things at the wall, curated, of course, within an ideas framework. But there's something awesome about that. And then starting to play with this material. Otherwise, like you say, with the three directions, right from the off, you're cutting off opportunities otherwise and possibilities.
I could not agree with you more. Like I just had this really wonderful reminder of that right before Parody, right after Parody. So I can't remember, but I worked on I haven't worked on them in a while because the budget's just shit and all that. But I worked on a music video with the band Linkin Park, and we did this thing where Johan is a member of the band and director, and was like, "Hey, can you make these XR projection, like basically big visual projections behind us as we're gonna perform, and I'm gonna film it and all this stuff?" And I said, "Sure, I would love to." We have this idea of like taking the offices of Severance and then like distorting them and warping them and making them weird and trippier. And there was this whole thing of like the band's locked in this windowless room is basically a mirror of society right now, and the news cycles and just sort of darkness. And so it was an interesting and simple enough idea. But what was incredible about it was that we didn't know what it was going to be, and we were doing piles of experiments and render. It was all in 3D, these 3D renders that were of these room warping and doing trippy shit. We kind of didn't really know. We kind of knew about what it was, but not really. And we were just experimenting and making stuff to see what would work. And like us, me, Joe, the producer, the technical director we're up till 1 a.m. the night before the shoot. We didn't even have a full idea of what it was going to be at all. And at first, like our producers were kind of freaking out, but I figured out pretty quickly. I was like, well, we have tons of stuff here. It's cool stuff. We don't know what it is. Maybe we don't need to know what it is. Like, and it occurred to me, we were just making some sandboxes, some playgrounds, and then we would put it up and film it and just find these happy accidents and moments. And that was eye-opening for me. I was like, we don't need to answer this. We just need to make some general areas to play in. And then we're going to film this for a day and have 5 hours of moments for a 2.5 minute, 3 minute video. Like this is what it should be. But it was like it was kids eating ramen in some random production stage at 1 a.m. the night before a shoot with no real. It was like, but it felt so right. It felt so cool. Like you're like, yeah, this is like starting out again. It was really enjoyable.
Well, then there's beauty in the medium of music that allows for that, isn't there? Open-endedness and inconclusiveness. And actually, I mean, sometimes it's much better.
100%. It was like, I mean, and there was like, all the grown-ups are like, I don't know, I'm freaking out what it is. And I was like, I know, it's crazy. It's going to be fun and we'll figure it out and it's going to be great. And it was. It turned out great. So it's cool.
Yeah, one of my favourite stories within music, and to that end, is I got to talk to Rob O'Connor of Style Rouge, and they did the iconic Train Spotting poster and all Blur's early art direction. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Park Life album cover with the two greyhounds.
Yeah.
And well, the story is that they'd been recording late one night, and they were sort of chipping away at various directions. And Damon walked home late after a recording session, and he walked past the bookmaker William Hill. And in the 90s, they had this kind of art direction that was just lots of panels of lots of different sports, so snooker, greyhounds, football, rugby, so on. And I would remember it really well. It was a real strong visual aesthetic. And Damon was walking past there, and the story goes is that he saw the window and rang Rob back up and said, William Hill's window, that's Parklife. That is Parklife. Like, I can't give you more of a description than that. So they played with that idea, and in the end, they distilled it right down to the greyhounds. Used a stock image, stuck the logo on there, and the rest is history. And I love the fact that it was a stock image because it speaks to the power of the idea. almost
Yeah.
negating the need for that to be something beautiful and finessed.
What do you think about this? Because there's something about that I think it's hard to train, but I think it's every bit a part of what we do in, let's say creativity, but let's say design in this case. It's like you feels like you kind of have to live it all the time. And I'm not saying like don't have a life, but like Damon walking by and just being having the metaphorically the lights on in his head to look feels like what the best case for a lot of this stuff. And I know I feel that. Like it's always like it's always work, but it's never work, you know? Like it's
Yeah. That's how I live my life. And I think and I go through this with every coaching client, it's living your life as the artist you were born to be, and not in a professional sense either, but just as a person who is curious, interested in the world, and is
yeah.
constantly in service of that inner artist. I really think it's that. And I think those solutions, and the best thing is those solutions come in the moments when you're not thinking about work, usually, you
That
know?
I mean, I always joke, you know, the bathroom, the shower, the
Yeah.
drive somewhere. It's yeah. I
Yeah,
agree.
it's incredibly true. History is littered with accounts of people who, just drift. I think that I can't remember the number, but there's quite a high number of Nobel Prize winners that had their breakthrough moment either in a dream or just drifting off to sleep or upon waking.
It's Isaac Newton and the apple. It's
Yeah. It's fascinating. So what about the origins of laundry? Where did you start with that? And was there an idea? Did you have a vision, or was it a feeling out process?
oh, we're idiots. I worked at a couple motion graphic studios from 1999 2005 roughly. Um, and I was working at one that was, again, it was an offshoot from the very first studio I worked at, but the hours were really long, and it was incredibly creative but incredibly hectic. And I'll tell you, oh, okay, I'll be completely vulnerable about and truthful about this. I felt super insecure there, and I also started to really let my ego get out of hand. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this myself on my own, so I can be the boss and all that. And so I met up with a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, Tony Liu, who was working in film side of things, and he was like, "Well, I want to start a studio too. Let's do it together." And I was like, "Well, that seems like a fresh twist, so it's not just the same old motion graphics people." So we did that, and we really, I think it was just as simple as we wanted to do it our own wild way in a more efficient way than we thought we were seeing from the studios that we were working at. And we did. And we have we've continued to do so 20 years later by some miracle. But we always were just like, hey, let's be as efficient as we can and really just do it with our point of view, and that has really kept us going this whole time, and doing it in a way that I mean, we really just started off doing motion graphics, and then it turned into like, well, really the secret ingredient is we just weren't assholes about it, and we're just trying to be as helpful as we can while still just doing what we wanted to do for the most part and try to make a little money in there. Um, and everything in between was always just like, hey, you guys are cool. I know you do motion graphics. Can you do green screen shoot? Okay, yeah, sure. Let's do that. Now you're doing green screen shoot. Can you do this little live action insert shot? Great. Or can you do CGI? And so it was always just a like, can you do this extra thing? Because we like hanging out with you. And then pretty quickly along the way, me more so than Tony, although he's very good about it too, is to your point about curiosity, we just always were working on little things on the side, little experiments, always curious to try new technologies, new everything. And I don't, we're not on the front edge of it like some people, but we're not back in the shadows either. But we're steady with how we expand our learnings. And so those few things have just sort of kept us going for a while.
That willingness to express that curiosity as well is something that I think people. I don't know if it's disciplines or titles or you could point to anything. It could be education. There's a number of reasons why people might not have the confidence to express that desire to do something that isn't within their job title. But I think that, what you explained about the trust you were given there earlier to do a lot of wild and wacky things, that probably builds some inner authority, or at least some self-trust that these ideas and this curiosity you have, that might be worth in that. It's not just whimsical or foolish.
Yeah, I have lots of thoughts on that actually. So I think the reason, because we struggle with this with our company's gotten a lot bigger now, and it's a little bit tricky to get teammates that aren't owners of the company to be as curious or as proactive as we can be. And to be honest, I actually don't fault them in any way. I think when you go to work at any company, there's this you're like, okay, I have a boss, I have people that are paying me a paycheck. I need to play within the structure. I don't know what is too much or too little. And so often and especially the bigger the company gets, there's this thing of being like, okay, well, what are the protocols? Am I going to get myself in trouble or not? And it becomes you end up playing within a particular box that sometimes doesn't allow confidence to go this way or that way or whatever it might be. So I completely get that. And I've actually kind of understood it as one of my jobs now is to be kind of a catalyst for artists to push outside of that box or to create programs or spaces for them to do that. The other thing, I think when you're talking about like the wild work, we've had phases where we've been doing really, really mediocre work at Laundry and we learned from it. And one of the things we learned from it is you only get the work that you put out there. So, I think there's this, and I hear this from designers all the time, particularly younger ones, like, how do I work on that cool stuff? And, so on and so forth. And, no client ever trusts me to do that or whatever it might be. And they're not wrong. I fully get it. But I think the mechanism that is broken there is that they're waiting for permission and they're not giving a client any reason to give them permission to do it because they're in that weird void of not having the work to do the work that they want to do. And we've even been in that. So my big thing a while ago, and again, I saw a talk in Sydney where a studio came up and said, oh, we just made a bunch of our experiments and kept putting them on Instagram. And eventually people started calling us. And that was a light bulb moment for me and got me into the whole design daily thing, which is, I'd say 98% of the book that you saw was just making this artwork, posting it on LinkedIn and Instagram, and just forging ahead with the world I wanted to make and create and live in. And then clients started coming in and asking for permission to be in my world versus me asking to be in their world. And along the way, there's proper commissions by the piles that are not nearly as fun but pay well and all that. But it changed the narrative completely to make a bunch of stuff. Because in all honesty, I think, and I struggle with this, like we all are afraid to suck at something, but it's simple arithmetic. The more you write code, the better you're going to get at it very fast due to the consistency of it. And then ultimately you put it out there. Eventually people are going to come knocking and being like, hey, I want to be part of that. And that's exactly what has happened. But yeah,
it's absolutely right, and sometimes you have to, and I don't know where, maybe it's experience, but the bravery to fight for ideas too, and is it quite important. I think I saw Sir John Hegarty talking about. He was another person I talked to, and we talked about the. Do you remember the Flat Eric Levi adverts?
yeah.
He talked about, I think he'd been told no twice. It was the third time they finally just kind of gave up and went, all right, John, do it, just do it. Convince us wrong kind of thing. He'd been wholly rejected twice. And I think might have even been on the third time. They said, we've told you no, we mean no kind of thing. And he kept on pushing for this idea because he just saw the opportunity there, and they all thought he'd gone truly mad. But in the end, it went on to become this iconic thing and was just so different.
Well, it's an interesting thing about that. I'm in this right now. Actually, it's so I directed this commercial and I don't, and this is one thing where I don't fancy myself an official live action. I mean, I'm an officially live action director. I direct tons of live action, but I wasn't trained in it, so I've always been a little uncertain about my worth in it, right? But I directed this commercial like a month ago, really cool one, but and I was really excited about it. And it, but when we got it to edit, it kind of looked like shit. I was like, this doesn't really flow. Everybody seems sort of unhappy about it, and like but as luck would have it, and this is a different cultural thing in the States, when you work on when you film a commercial, you send it to the agency and you're kind of just done. But this agency is in London, and in Europe, it would appear that the directors stay or can stay with the advert all the way through editorial and visual effects. And so this agency just kept asking for my opinion, and I was like, oh, and it's kind of like Levi's thing. I kept being like, okay, let's do this, let's do that, and then they would do stuff, and then I was like, well, let me see. I was like, guys, that sort of sucks. I don't want to do that. Let's do this. This will make it cooler. And they were actually kind of listening, and it still didn't quite get there, but like we have literally just been like pushing notes at it and trying things. I mean, aggressively, and now it's starting to kind of form. And my point of that being is that we're just pressing and pushing forward, forward, and forward, and kind of just keep pounding at it, and eventually it kind of turns into something. But it's really hard to have the tenacity and sort of confidence to keep pounding away at it. I think
It,
that's
it,
a big thing.
I think it's an experience thing, and I think that maybe it's that's why the onus, I guess, like you said, is on owners and leaders creating the opportunity for that. Because, like you said, to your point of people going to work, you can expect that of someone who's just starting in
No,
the industry and sort of wants to please. That jars against where a person is at. Therefore, I guess the question is it important to create a culture within an agency that allows for their voice to be heard enough, just enough to grow and enough to kind of, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a hierarchical thing where if the creative directors, for example, have a good enough dialogue with those above and below them, that ultimately you're creating a company culture that maybe enables just enough growth for them to move towards that.
I agree with you, and I push for and I hope that our creative culture shifts towards that mindset as well. Like one thing that makes me happy is I mean, there's exceptions obviously, but I think we're well through this culture where creative directors or leaders basically train young people through negativity or tell them everything's shit and do kind of a tougher culture. I think on the flip side, everybody can't get the trophy for participating, but on the flip side, I think we can encourage and support each other in the community and in studios or whatever it is to help kind of boost confidence, to find I don't know, that I guess that confidence to push and to trust that you have a voice to push creative further. I think maybe even more so now because so many of us are working remotely, and I think it's way easier to get stuck in our heads. And so that's what I hope. That's my pipe dream, is that we can create a culture we actively can. I talk to artists about them, but you just send me your stuff. If you're starting doing something new and you're not certain, send it to me. I'm going to tell you, I'm cheerlead you, like, because it's just like so much of it is just the act of doing, not the result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I,
and just that one comment from someone in your shoes with that experience can be, can shift the needle. It can move the needle for people. Of course it can. The first encounters and being on a wavelength. Even just, even in the early iterations of doing this show and talking to people who I'd idolized. I mentioned Rob O'Connor earlier, and just actually just having a point of conversation where we were on a wavelength and kind of, that felt great. That felt
yeah.
amazing. It was like, oh shit, this is the guy who did all the album artwork of my youth. And I've just sort of held my own in a conversation with him. That feels amazing.
I, Several of those conversations at Paradisa too. Brian Collins and Stefan Zagmeister. I was like, what am I doing here? But it was just that. It was just everybody's in wanting the same things to do cool shit and push forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's incredible. And but one bit I wanted to just touch upon in the book that jumped out at me was your kind of, what's the story with I don't know if chasing the money is that the right way to frame it, but there's a story, that almost led you down to a really bad place, and then the Simpsons thing. I'd love to hear that story if you'd be happy to
Oh
elaborate.
yeah. So I forget when it was. It was maybe halfway through, however long, 10 years ago. We had an executive producer we worked with, and we just weren't sure about ourselves on the business side of things in terms of how to get work and all that. But we had this executive producer that came on. It was great. He got us tons of work. He had tons of relationships. Um, but we weren't confident enough or wise enough, quite frankly, to know that we needed to always focus on good creative. And we were always insecure about cash flow and money. And so he would get us lots of jobs, a lot of shit jobs, but that paid pretty well. And he got us this one job that was it was basically motion graphics and filming for creating an education course for like 3 hours. And it shut our studio down for like 11 months. Not entirely, but mostly to work on this. It was it was hell. Like it was just really hard. It was long. It was uninteresting. All the artists and freelancers were like, I never want to work on this again. People were quitting left and right. And it was a big budget at the time, but in the grand scheme wasn't that big of a budget. And we did it. We got to the end of it. Everybody was burnt out and miserable. And then the executive producer quit. He was like, I'm done. I don't want to do this with you guys anymore. He had his own thing. And we didn't he kind of never he encouraged us not to to get at salespeople or to market. He kind of wanted everything to sort of go through him for his own reasons, and we were just left with an empty bag at the end of it because our our sales was entirely through this mechanism of just getting money, just this one guy. And so if we didn't have that at the end, we didn't have any work that we could market ourselves with to our target audience, which is mainly advertising agencies, because you're only as good as your somewhat newest stuff. So we had nothing. At the same time, I'll under the hood of it, and my business partner is a lot more grounded than I am, but I was super insecure overall. I found myself having not dealt with a lot of the trauma of my childhood as much as I sort of illustrated that I ran away from, and I quite literally did. I found myself in a deep, deep, deep substance addiction, and it all kind of came crashing and hitting at the same time. I have a family, and I was like, all right, no billing, almost no studio. I'm a mess. Let me. It was as closest to rock bottom as you could possibly be. So then we just picked up the pieces. Luckily, we're pretty efficient about saving money enough to sort of get us for a bit. And we got this one little project for The Simpsons that was, it was like a $30,000 US budget, which is not very big for what it was. They're like, we have this idea of these characters that like we have to market the 20th season of Simpsons. We can't show episodes in marketing because people will think it's the show. We have this deconstructed idea for the print. Here's some stuff, make these adverts. And we were just so deflated from everything. We're like, fuck it all. We got out pen and paper, started drawing piles of all this weird stuff, took it into Illustrator and started making all these really experimental things. Literally from this point of view, we're like, well, we have nothing else to lose at this point. So we might as well just go ape shit on this and just go out with a bang. And made these, and we had no idea. We had no plans. We were just so beaten up, but they were wildly successful. And that was never the plan because we didn't think we had any worth in that sense. But they were, and then it kind of slowly got us back up to the races a bit.
I'm very interested in the negative emotion spectrum and adversity's role in creativity. And when I wrote my second non-fiction book, The Creative Condition, I wrote about abandon in particular. I find it very interesting, and there's something, I think the negative emotion spectrum is unsustainable long term, but can be incredibly powerful sometimes in the moment. And that's a great instance of it that you've just described. It's that kind of almost lash out I don't care anymore. Here's what I'll do. And sometimes there's immense power in that. I don't know yet. I even know how you start to harness that consciously, but I just find it really interesting.
I do agree with you. I think I know that a lot of industries worldwide don't do this, but we pitch a lot and competitively. And I will say that let me just say, I'm not looking to lose a pitch, but when you lose a pitch, you learn a lot more than when you win it. And
Hmm.
and and I would say a lot more in a constructive way. You probably overthink why you don't lose a pitch much more than the reason really is. And it sucks, it feels shitty, but on the flip side, it kind of forces you by overthinking it into some new, even better behaviors and techniques and approaches. So I agree with you. I think, and or just like the this would be a little bit controversial for creatives, but I think also there's that whole notion of saving all your work for the night before and doing the all-nighter to get to hit the deadline for whatever reason. Sometimes I think that's self-fabricated to make pressure for yourself to create drama, to basically smashing two rocks together to make a diamond and
Hmm.
forcing a bit of chaos into the place to come up with something where you don't overthink and you just do and make something out of nowhere that's incredible. It's a long-winded way of saying I agree with you, and I think that there's in little bursts some drama can really help creativity.
Yeah, I used it quite. I'm a huge pro wrestling fan. I never grew out of it. I never will. I just adore it and the art form. And it was Shawn Michaels who I quoted in the book. Who he was had a real sort of sleeping pill problem going on in the late 90s, a real troubled place. But the performances, it's considered some of the best work that's ever been done in the industry to this day. And he said I think he said in a creative line of work, when there's nothing to lose and you don't care about anything, it makes you invincible. And I used that as an example of something that in that really sort of refined burst is a thing. And you said the same there in the story about The Simpsons. It's that kind of you reach a moment sometimes, and actually that's kind of really powerful response to a negative situation. I guess what I said about it being long term is that you can't stay angry and and continue to make friends and build relationships and produce good work over a long timeline. But I think that in moments, it is just it's rocket fuel at times.
I agree. I mean, this year I haven't really been wanting to create stressful situations for myself or for anybody else. But one of my big sort of themes every year, I kind of have a theme, and this year has been to dive into the chaos, and
Hmm.
and that I think it's from that place because not in a precarious moment, but creating intensity and diving into the uncertain and chaotic moments. And not create them again, but to be there, I think is when really creative things seem to happen, and kind of really getting much more comfortable with the uncertainty of it, because I think that that's when you're like, yeah, I don't know, like this is nuts. I don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be something cool. Like, because I talk about this a lot. I been doing this a bit. It literally never not works out.
Hmm.
Like we've never. When I look back on it, I don't think we've ever really failed. I mean, maybe 3 or 4 times something went like got canceled, but like out of 20 years and thousands of projects, like it's pretty good. So it's gonna always it gives me confidence. Like, hey, I don't know, but it's gonna be cool. And I
Hmm.
think I like what you're talking about too, because I think it's a space that I think we all strive for and create in sort of more oddly stressful situations. But the whole rock star thing, like you hear back and you're like, Guns N' Roses or anybody was like, oh yeah, we were fucked up in the studio and just recorded this song and it vibed, and then it's some hit. They weren't like, hey guys, all right, here's the outline to how to make this hit. Like, I mean, now
Yeah,
they probably do in pop music, but not in some of those classic moments.
yeah. Well, that's it, isn't it? Yeah, there's just that you can't separate the. It's not a badge of honor, but the artistry and the chaos. It's just because it's about uncertainty, isn't it? And it's about pushing for new solutions and discomfort. And as we know, chaos brings about a lot of that.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm kind of obsessed with this, and it's hard to do because certain projects just require a lot more people. But when we were at Paradiso, I was I don't even know how he brought it up, but Stefan said this thing that really stuck with me. He was talking about his projects, and he was like, it's when I work with four people, the question is how how great can we push this together to make it even greater? He's like, when I work with 20 people, the question is how can I just not make this suck? And
Mm.
and it was an interesting insight of like, you know, keeping the band small so you can create synergy to make cool shit together and just be like, how much cooler can we make this? And that really stuck with me about like the people and the team, you know what I mean? And you can do it bigger, but it is a lot harder with a bigger team. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I always wonder, when you look at the global giant agencies, when we're talking 10,000 people, it's like that blows my mind a little bit. And I guess it's, maybe it's that thing where I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe it's about
Yeah.
creating microcosms and real trust at a local level. I really don't know.
I we're working on this feature film right now, and we just have a one small little designy role in it, but it's definitely that where there's this whole ecosystem, and there's a director, and he siphons out, and but it's more or less just a bunch of little pods, and that's got to be the only way to do it with a bunch of managers. But it's like it's overwhelming. You're like, I don't know. I totally get why you're in a bad mood all the time because this seems insane.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. Do you, so your role today within laundry, like you mentioned there about kind of championing, cheerleading artists, um, are you good at trusting, the people on the ground, so to speak, in terms of running the show? Is it unconditional trust? And I don't know, what is it? Tell me about the role today and how sort of.
Absolutely. So, co-founder ECD Laundry. I my day to day is I work as a more or less as a creative director on a series of projects, anywhere from 3 to 10 projects with varying degrees of hands-onness. And then and both as like creative direction, but also sometimes I get on the box and right now like I'm doing some animations on this one thing, sometimes design. And then a humongous amount of the time the past few years has been mentorship and sort of self-initiated project at the studio, marketing, sale. I do a lot of our sales stuff with our sales team, capabilities meetings and all that stuff. So it's oversee social media stuff, like just all kinds of different things. And so, but I think the big push recently has been a lot of mentorship work with our team of artists and try to help them grow and get to where they want to go, and then a lot of work with our R&D and well, technical and creative as well. So always a lot going on. Um,
Yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, and what I find interesting is, the place that you came from. So the start with graffiti and that kind of freedom and a very interesting journey. I guess one thing I've observed is that some people will tell me about subservience. So education tends to create subservience. So sometimes people coming into the industry might not quite have the initiative or the bravery to sort of, I don't know, express to push forward big ideas. Um, does your background put you in a position where you were able to mentor in that regard and to help people to build trust in themselves?
that's at least from my perspective, that's 99% of the mentorship role is to none of our artists lack the skill or at least the ability to grow themselves creatively. They just don't think they can. So they are lack the confidence. So my job is humongously to be a cheerleader to not only tell people that they can, but be a catalyst for them to be like, hey, let's make this spec project. Let's do this 5 second thing in this style that you're interested in, and you can partner with this person and learn from them. Or let's talk about mindset, or let's teach you what. Like I have one woman who's very good at animation, but is completely insecure about design. So it's like, okay, well let me get you this course, complete this course, and like basically be like the push for them to create structure for them to achieve what they might want to, but don't feel like they can or don't have the confidence or focus to. So I do a humongous amount of work in that world because that's what I realized is there's very, very few people, at least in our studio or our circle, that don't have the ability. It's just a mindset issue most of the time, understandably. So that we do I do quite a bit to like, and even with peers and friends and younger studio friends and like that, it's just like just sharing people to help everybody kind of collectively sort of lift up and win
I love
and
that.
thrive. Yeah, because it's so much of it is just mindset. That's it. Like I just don't think it's. I don't think it. I don't think this is. I think it seems like. Oh, wait, my friend of mine. There's this a really really amazing artist and also teacher Vincent Schwenk in Germany does a lot of amazing 3D things, and he had this slide at one of his talks that was like, you I'm not going to get this right, but basically, you look at Instagram and you're seeing one person's best day out of like 900 shit days creatively, and Instagram makes you think that every day is is the, that's just everybody's best day, but really you're a series of a bunch of people's best days, and it really discourages artists that are starting out, and it's and I'm and so my role is to break that
Yeah.
misnomer, and
Hmm.
help people just make stuff that they like to do.
Yeah, and it's that trust and that steering is really profound. So the reason Hector's book came to be, the one that I wrote with him for Paradiso, Hector's a unique spirit. The trust he's given me in areas that I maybe had a little bit of that sort of. Yeah, we'll go with imposter syndrome. It's the first thing that springs to mind. But I didn't have a lot of it, because I'd put 5 fiction books out there. So I clearly didn't have a lot of imposter syndrome. But I had enough to think, well, I'm doing this. I'm doing it anyway. I don't care. I love it. And I love it too
Yeah.
much not to do it. So I will keep doing it and I will find out where it's going to take me. And there've been periods of guilt for doing that because I did a lot of the fiction writing during early twin parenthood to the detriment of taking care of my illustration business. However, that's the thing I was feeling the most. And I've never stopped myself from pursuing that thread because I think it's important. So I wrote a short story for Hector's book at Off 2023, the first one that I spoke at, and he really loved it. And so he came to me and said, I want to tell my story. People keep telling me to tell my story. I think Paradiso is the time. I'd like you to do it, but I don't want to do it in an interview format. Can we do it with the same beat, the same energy that you wrote that story in? And I was just blown away by that challenge. But the beautiful thing about Hector is we had 10 hours of conversations, but he just completely stepped off and let me do my thing. And therefore, it goes back to what you said earlier about one of your earlier jobs is that, oh, okay, I've been tasked to do this. There's trust in me to do this. I'd better step up and do this well. So that's what
Yeah.
happened. And it was an incredible experience because it was like, well, okay, any bits of doubt, it's like, don't doubt, just feel and move towards it. But the trust of a steer of someone like Hector with more experience than me gave me the validation I needed. And that's what I see going on here between you and your staff, which is a beautiful thing.
He's the catalyst for all of us, for me too, with my book and a bunch of other projects we worked on together to be like, hey, I want to do something cool, but you can, I don't really care. But just don't hold back, basically. Like just do what you want to do, not what this, watered down, restrained version of the client is. And and when you do that, it's cool. But then it also does this other thing. It invites more opportunities like it to fall into your lap, right? Like and then take it to the next level, and take it to the next level, and like it's it, I mean, I just think about that with your books. Like you had your fiction books, and then you had the book for Off in 23, and then I was just like, well, that likes it because it's a domino effect, right? Like it one thing then sort of spills into the other thing, and then you keep building on top of that. But the you just have to do it, and then things come of it and grow out of it, and then you do more of it, and then before you know it, we're like, oh, that's what I want to be doing. I like that. That's pretty satisfying.
Yeah.
I
And
think
above
it's just
all,
a symbol of doing it. Like that's my big thing.
yes, it is. And maybe above all else, hence the title for Hector's book, do it because you mean it. You know, we called it the reason you're doing it, and do it because you mean it, because you feel like you have to do it, or you're curious and you need to find out where it's going to go. And I think that I'm a real big believer in it opening doors, and I heard it termed as invisible hands. That's that wonderful serendipity of feeling like you're on a path that was there, and that when you've started making the art that's right for you, I've seen it countless times, too many times to even doubt it anymore. But the sequence of people coming into your life that are invited by doing that work, like you said there, the domino
That's, I mean,
effect.
that's literally how you and I got connected. We both just did it, and then here we are standing at a table in Mexico. You know, it's funny. I had this funny thing last night. I haven't been on LinkedIn for, I don't know, 8, 9 months or something like that. And I had to open it last night to respond to a message. And I was looking at the feed for a second, and it was. I'm also impressed we haven't gotten to the AI conversation this far in, but here we are. Um, I looked at it, and it was all these posts about either why AI sucks or why AI is the future. And it's been that for months. But the thing that was hilarious to me is none of it was, "Hey, look what I made." It was all just commenting. It was all just chatter about still not making anything. And I had to laugh. I was laughing to myself. I was like, "This is just a bunch of no, like, you guys don't know. Like, no one knows." Like, it was like, just make it. Like, mix AI with non AI, or who knows? Like, let's just, let's. Why does there have to be rules? Like,
Mm,
and it was. I just got a laugh out of it because I was like, but all my friends just make stuff and see what happens, and who knows where it goes, and it's great.
yeah.
So it's cool. I was laughing though.
Yeah, I guess perhaps it speaks to the kind of the black and white way things have seemed to have gone in recent years. You know, like it's just everything's so partisan.
That's the thing, and I don't think it's. I think we saw. I think a really good example. I was so excited to meet them and like super fanboyed out, and then to have them be super nice on top of it. But the Valet Jamel, who we got to see in Merida, did all that sort of. They did the AI stuff, but then they mixed it with physical sets and lighting, and then these toys, and then they go back and they do their live
Hmm.
action, they do their 3D. They're like, what I love about them, and I think it's a feature, is there's no black and white. You just slam it all together, and just insane, indecipherable work of creativity comes out of it. And I think that's where we all need to be.
Absolutely, that and that's the only way to approach, isn't it? Otherwise, well, I don't know.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you either just stew in what might be and get caught up, and I don't know. Yeah, it's interesting times.
interesting times.
um, I've kept you for long enough, but there's one little thing I want to ask you, and it's something then, as I was thinking about this, there's you and Hector have both had moments of adversity, particularly in early life. Do you think there's something about that? I know, having written Hector's story, that for him there is, but do you think there's something about that creates the desire to find out, to push for things, and to kind of um, to make and think later almost?
Yeah. I think it creates an intensity. We can say a chip on your shoulder. It creates a motivation for sure. I think what you do with it is you can either stew in it and just let it eat you alive, or you can take it as fuel to create things and express things in some way. And I think that is, and then I think what happens is you find comfort in like-minded souls that are in that same place. Their reasons all vary 100%, but but I think you start to get into that mindset, and then you find like-minded souls. But I think the adversity is a huge fuel and engine for creativity. But I do think I was actually just talking about this the other day in one of my meetings. I think the reasons vary, but I almost doesn't don't think it matters. Like it we were talking about I don't know how we got to this, but we were talking about nepo babies and creativity, and this whole thing that, like, oh, you come from some richer family or creative family and you're an actor and musician, and that's cheating. And it's just like, not really. Like, why the fuck not? Like, but we were talking about some of the most creative people. Like, they're on the one hand of the spectrum, you have someone that comes from absolute hell or nothing or poverty that literally has nothing else to lose and became this, like famous rapper. So like literally it was just either like death or despair or creativity and music, or athletes come, you've seen that story many times. On the flip side, you have, you know, rich kids that are like, well, I have the confidence and the space to just self-express and make a bunch of artistic things and know that I can fall back on something. And, so you have that in. And then you have these personalities that are right in the middle that just have this personality to push, to be curious, to self-express and make some of the most creative things out there. So none of it is better or worse than the other. And it's phenomenal for creativity. And it's phenomenal for the person experiencing it. Like, you're like, I don't really kind of care what Charlie XCX or the Rolling Stones did. I get to enjoy this wonderful creativity. Like, that's great for society.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And neither is a badge of honor. Neither is guaranteed to success or failure.
No.
I just wish that there's a huge conversation at the moment about young guys and about the kind of we're at this moment in society where, there's a lot of things happening with young men at the moment. It's a confusing time and negative role models and everything else. I just wish that I could give it. I wish I could, for every 6 to 10 of them, I could assign a Tony Wilson and give them a community space and a voice to use the experience. And I think things would be very, very different. I'm a huge believer in that.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's that show Adolescence, and I haven't gotten through it all the way, and then I know it's been kind of hovering around this sort of male, kind of the Andrew Tate thing that's keeps coming up more and more. I'm just like, what are you talking about? But it does, and it's and not in a good way. And I agree, like I agree with you, creating a space for everybody to come together empathetically. I think there's so much more to there to unpack, but I hope for that as well.
Mm-hmm. Me too. Right. Well, this has been amazing, PJ. Thank you very much for taking the time to chat.
Thanks, man.
It's been it's been a joy to jump into the stories that I've been reading about in the book.
Oh, well, thank you. It was such a joy to meet you, and I've obviously been just seeing you pop up doing wonderful things at Off, and then ultimately Paradiso, and then our chats. So I'm very grateful.
Likewise, thank you very much. Thank you so much to PJ Richardson for taking the time to talk to The Creative Condition. I hope you got a lot from that conversation. I love these vulnerable stories, these real human adventures into creativity and making it all work, and near misses and disasters, and they really are the most inspiring kind of stories that make us realise that this is far from easy, but it is all possible. I think we forget that sometimes. I certainly do on the muggy Monday mornings, on the bad days when the printer's not working and I'm stressing over a lack of work. It feels very far from magic. But I think that when it comes around, we have to immerse ourselves in it and just remember why we got into it in the first place, and that it is hard, but it is ultimately worth the fight. But I do think you have to change. I do think you have to adapt and course correct as you go. I can help you do that. Take a look at the coaching sessions through thecreativecondition.com. You'll find it at thecreativecondition.com/coach. It's got all the information on the pit stop, the talk that I do. I'm building some courses with people at the moment. It's very exciting. I love it. I find the work incredibly fulfilling, and I wrote a piece recently about how, as much as I love my illustration and my art, you can feel very disposable as someone who is brought in with all excitement and gusto for a query and then just forgotten without even a notification that the project's not happening and left in the dirt. And it gets quite soul-destroying after a while. 18 years into the game now, I'm 42, but I still feel the sting and the burn of those moments. And this coaching, to sit in a room with someone one-to-one, hear their truths, their honest situation in their lives, and get to help them join it all together and move forward with that same magic, is really fulfilling, and it offers something completely different. So I need that range, and that's what's going on. So cheers for listening, guys. I hope you enjoyed this show. Get in touch, ben@bentalon.com if that is the case. illustrationx.com. They've sponsored the show since day one, and it means the world. Check them out, their global range of illustration and animation portfolios now, illustrationx.com. Always on the lookout for the best fit in terms of new show partners and sponsors. If If you want to come and speak to my audience, I would love to have more supporters on the show, so get in touch about that also. That's about it from me. Thank you again to PJ Richardson and Laundry for the time today. Got some great stuff coming up. We've got some mental health special. Whoever listened to the burnout one, I'd love to hear your feedback. We've got a special coming up on anxiety with a psychologist, or Wendy Dignan too, who is brilliant. Much more down that path. So yeah, I recognise that the world is very heavy at the moment, so I want to help creatives get a baseline of optimism and find a better way. All right, cheers, guys. Take care. Have a great week. If you get a second, tell a friend. Please do rate, review, subscribe. Other than that, stay creative. Have a great week.